Okay, now I'm here by quite a busy road, so I will apologise in advance for the road noise, but this grassy verge down here has got a little bit of a treat for us. So what we've got here, these are called fairy ring mushrooms, and as you can see they grow in a ring formation here, and sometimes it will be a complete ring, but more often when it gets to this size it starts to break up and it will become pieces of a ring, often superimposed rings. Anyway, let's get down and have a quick look at this mushroom. So it's quite variable in appearance, and so let's have a look at a number of different examples. So we've got one there that's still got a convex cap, and a more mature specimen there that has the cap has inverted and gone slightly concave. One of the typical features of this mushroom, although you can't see it so much here, here's a specimen where you can see it, is this thing called the umbo, which is on top of the cap. It's a darker coloured like lump in the middle of the cap there. So quite a variety of different forms and stages of development of this mushroom. One of the easiest ways to recognise this mushroom, well, there's several ways actually. One is obviously it tends to grow in rings like this, and you'll find these rings even when the mushrooms aren't here. You'll see a ring of slightly darker grass because the grass is feeding on the waste products from the mushrooms. One of the very good diagnostic features of this mushroom is that the stalk is incredibly tough. The stalk is actually flexible, and I'll show you, this is one of the, it doesn't detach easily from the cap, so the cap will tend to tear like that before the stalk comes away, but you can actually tie this stalk in a knot. It's that fibrous and tough. Anyway, so we're going to pick all of these mushrooms and take them home, and we'll cook them up. So the other thing to watch out for with these mushrooms, they are sometimes infested by maggots, and those maggots will tend to be at the top of the stalk here in the thickest bit of the flesh. It looks like we're lucky today, so these ones look remarkably clean and healthy. So I've got my basket and I've got my knife, and I'm actually going to cut off the stalk base from these mushrooms because I'm picking them for the table. I've already identified them in the field. Now if you were picking them to identify, you would probably choose to leave that stalk, to leave the base on, because actually the appearance of the base of the stalk on mushrooms is actually one of the diagnostic features that you can use to identify them. Once again, sorry for the road noise. We are not far away from quite a busy road, so we just have to try to ignore that if we can. So now the reason I'm cutting off these bits of stalk is that if you just throw the mushrooms in with the stalk attached, very often you'll find little bits of dirt fall inside the gills there, and it makes the mushrooms very difficult to clean for the table. Here's a really good example of one with the prominent umbo there on top of the cap. You can see the cap has that sort of hat-like shape. It's almost got a bump in the middle there. So we've got some nice ones over here as well. So let's have those as well. So I think we'll probably leave some of these older tatty specimens right where they are and leave them to grow up and produce their spores. But we'll have a walk along this verge here and see if if we can find anything else. So I don't know if you can see it on the video here, but there's actually a very large dark ring of grass. And this will be another fairy ring. So what I'll do, I'm going to pause the frame right there and I will outline it for you and you might be able to see it a bit better. But if we have a look at this ring, so it runs along here and around, it looks like this patch of mushrooms is not actually fruiting right now, but we can probably expect that to do so later in the year. No, nothing much else to find here. Okay. So there's another view of that dark ring in the grass. Maybe you can just about make it out. Let's head for home. I've got my little basket of mushrooms here. Let's take them home and have a closer look. On the way home, I just spotted some rather nice agaricus mushrooms over there on that central reservation. So we're going to nip over and have those, I think. Wait for a gap in the traffic. Okay, so we've got here, actually again you can see this is a ring here, and we've got some rather nice agaricus mushrooms here. Now I will identify the exact species when we get home, but look at that, what a beautiful specimen. Again, I'm going to cut off the base of this stalk here. Wouldn't do that if I was taking them home to identify them, but because we've got video footage of the appearance, and because look at that sandy soil, if that sandy soil gets into the gills of this mushroom, it will be ruined. So always place them cap upwards in the basket like that again to discourage infiltration from sand and dirt. Now the veil there that's on that cap is another diagnostic feature. We will use that when we get home to help identify these. And there's one that's completely closed cap. Okay, so let's get those home. Okay, so we've got our little haul of mushrooms here, and we're going to use Roger Phillips' rather excellent book, Mushrooms and Other Fungi of Great Britain and Europe, to identify them. And actually I've already done the ID. What we've got here is the horse mushroom. And it's important with identifying these things that you tick off all of the identifying criteria in the description. And so we look at the cap, we look at the gills, we look at the flesh, and the habitat that we found it in, and everything else like that. So there we go. So actually what we've got here is almost textbook specimens, and I'll show you what I mean by that. So look at that. So I've picked these mushrooms from that location before anyway, so I'm actually very confident about the ID. But let's just have a look there. Yeah, so look at that. Textbook specimens, literally. So we're going to go ahead and make something out of these mushrooms, and I think it's going to be mushroom fried rice. Okay, so we're just going to start with some leeks and carrots, just gently frying in a pan. We're just going to soften those, and then we'll add the mushrooms and the rice. So let's prepare these mushrooms. The first thing to do is to brush off any sand and dirt that's adhering to the outside of the caps, because we don't really want gritty, sandy debris in our food. There's not so much of that necessary with these little fairy ring mushrooms, so I think what we'll do with those will just be broken up into pieces like that. Just break them up with my hands and they'll be just fine. Now these mushrooms are really good for drying, so if I had more than I could use here today, I could just put those pieces of cap on a wire rack, and in about 48 hours they would dry to crispy little leathery pieces, which could then be stored for rehydration later. So I'm just going to take my mushrooms, pull off any little pieces of grass or whatever, and tear those up into chunks. I might be a little bit judicious about some of these pieces because they've been nibbled a little bit by wildlife. Now with my horse mushrooms, just going to make sure we brush off all of the dirt, including any that's adhering to the stalk, and these we will just cut up into wedges like that. So I'm going to go ahead and get all my mushrooms prepared and cut up, and then we'll go back to the pan. Now you might be about to ask why I'm not washing these mushrooms. In general, I don't wash wild foods unless they've got filthy dirt on them. However, these have got a little bit of sand and grit attached, so all we're going to do is take a damp paper towel and just give them a little wipe over like that, and that's all they need. Now, I've heard people argue that it's fine to wash mushrooms. That's fine, that's your choice. If you want to wash your mushrooms, you go ahead and do that. I have found that it tends to make them a little bit soggy in the pan, and I don't appreciate that, so I don't wash them. But I don't mind if you do. So there we are. I've got my bowl of prepared mushroom pieces. These bits here can go in the compost. So we'll turn up that heat and get things sizzling a little bit. And then I'm just going to throw in our pieces of mushroom. Now it's quite a lot of mushroom there, but this is mushroom fried rice, and I don't want it to be easy on the mushroom. Mushrooms are the star of this dish, so we've got quite a lot of them in here. So I'm just going to cook that down for probably 5 minutes, just to soften those mushrooms, bring out some of the flavours and juices from them. Okay, now the mushrooms are mostly cooked now, so I'm going to put in my rice. And now I've got just some cooked brown rice that's been cooled down, so it's cooked earlier and chilled down. I'll just toss that around to get the rice frying and to get the mushroom juices to infuse into that rice. Okay, and there we are, we're done. So we'll turn the heat off. Let's serve this up and we'll just taste a little bit. So I'm just going to put some in my dish here, making sure that I do get some of both sorts of mushrooms. Probably enough here for 2 people. So let's have a little taste. Make sure I get a piece of both species of mushrooms. There we go. Really good. Those fairy ring mushrooms have got a really nice earthy, mushroomy taste. And the horse mushrooms, well, they're like the mushrooms that you're used to, but on steroids. Just got so much more flavour than the mushrooms you get in packets in the shops. So that was my little wild mushroom adventure for today. Hope you enjoyed watching. Thanks for joining me, and I hope to see you again soon.